Street Fighter is a franchise that has delivered to us dozens upon dozens of now iconic characters, but as legendary as many of these are, few have an appearance which is quite as striking as Cammy White. Ever since this blonde bombshell first exploded onto the scene, she has remained a solid fan favourite, with her currently captivating an entire new generation of hearts in the smash hit success that is Street Fighter 6. What those who are new to the series may not be so aware of though, is the extremely convoluted history that surrounds the fighter, as well as the disturbing backstory that has laid the foundations for who the Cammy character is. Keeping all of this in mind, it's time to take a trip back through time so we can explore her entire journey, analysing her early life as a sprite-based beauty right up until her bootylicious, more realistic appearance in Street Fighter 6. So with all of that said, hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. This is the story of Cammy White. Yeah. Between 1991 and 1993, the outrageous success of Street Fighter 2 at home and in the arcades helped establish the Street Fighter brand as one of the most recognisable in gaming. One of the huge factors in the popularity of the game could easily be attributed to the title's bombastic characters. No game in history prior had ever presented so many different, memorable, stupendous playable fighters. After Street Fighter 2 The World Warrior saw release, it will receive many reiterations, including Champion Edition that offered up balance changes and allowed gamers to play as the previously unplayable bosses, and Turbo Hyper Fighting, which sped up the gameplay and balanced the title further. The fourth version of the arcade game, known as Super Street Fighter 2 The New Challengers, would see release on Capcom's new System 2 hardware, with this iteration of the game being heavily marketed around the fact that you would get to play as 4 newcomers. These newcomers included the Bruce Lee inspired Fei Long, T-Hawk and DJ, but it would be the new lady fighter who would prove to be the most popular. Cammy was instantly adored, but how did this beauty come to be? Well, according to Noritaka Fadamizu, Capcom's research and development head at the time, he states that Cammy's inclusion in Super Street Fighter 2 was a result of him feeling that the franchise needed more female characters, rather than just Chun-Li, who obviously to this day remains incredibly popular too. Like Chun-Li before her, Cammy would be designed to utilise speed, which was the opposite to most male roster members, who instead relied on brutish strength. Japanese company Capcom would choose to give her a western look, with her sporting blonde hair, blue eyes and a scar under her left cheek. Compared to everyone else on the roster, her level of sex appeal would also be ramped up, which was easily achieved by designers depicting her wearing a green sleeveless thong leotard, a military red beret, red gloves, black boots and green camouflage stains on her legs. Honestly, who could forget this amazing design? In her maiden appearance, the character who went by the full name of Cammy White was said to be a deadly assassin who had previously worked for Shadaloo. You know, M.Bison and his team of villains who serve as the final bosses of Street Fighter 2. Shortly prior to the events of Super Street Fighter 2, it is said that Cammy would awaken with amnesia and be taken in by a different group known as Delta Red, a special force with headquarters in the United Kingdom. At this point, although she had no knowledge of her past, she would retain all of her fighting capabilities from her previous job role. In Street Fighter 2's plot, when the World Warrior tournament was announced, Cammy would feel a strange connection to M.Bison, so decided to enter the competition to try and learn more about this intriguing figure. Playing through the game as Cammy, she confronts Bison with him telling her that he was the one responsible for planting her in Delta Red in the first place, with the point of controlling the group from within. However, he did not foresee her losing her memory, which would mean that he had no further use for her. Once Bison is defeated, Cammy continues to work at Delta Red, with her teammates encouraging her to continue to live her newfound life. In this game, along with future appearances, mechanically Cammy features as a quick close range fighter, which allows her to gain an advantage in combat. This means she often hurls herself at opponents, relying on speed and priority to score victories. Speaking of her fighting capabilities, her biggest chink in her armour in the early days was her lack of ability to evade projectile attacks. However, she would improve in this area as the series progressed. Personality-wise, Cammy would become well known for her strong, forceful and determined nature. However, on top of these positive traits, her strong sense of military discipline, honour and drive would further propel her forward. Pair this greatness with her warfare mindset makes her a dangerous combatant to contend with, making her just as deadly as she is beautiful. Despite these strengths though, away from fighting, she is reportedly friendly, respectful and enthusiastic towards those she cares about, providing further reasoning as to why she is a great heroine. Just 1 year after the release of Super Street Fighter 2, it of course brings us to the live action Street Fighter movie, which hit theatres. Despite it often being mocked today, believe it or not, it was a huge commercial success, with a worldwide box office turning over 3 times its production costs. In this bizarre film, Shadaloo is depicted as a southeastern country where a war is taking place. In this alternate Street Fighter universe, M.Bison is a drug lord turned general who is fighting against the allied nations led by Guile. M.Bison was memorably portrayed by Raul Julia and Guile was played by Jean-Claude Van Damme. But while they both delivered great performances, the actress who played Cammy would be the one viewers couldn't get out of their heads. Street Fighter fans would be so lucky that Kylie Minogue would portray the franchise's new fan favourite. Kylie, who had previously launched a successful pop career after appearing as Charlene in Australian soap opera Neighbours, looked absolutely perfect as Cammy. Cammy in the movie features in the role of Guile's assistant, Sergeant Cammy White, functioning as great eye candy in this strange film. As of today, Kylie Minogue is considered one of the most successful music artists in both the United Kingdom and Australia's history, but to me, she will always be Cammy from Street Fighter. Kylie Minogue portraying Cammy would also be playable in the Street Fighter movie games, with these Mortal Kombat looking titles showing Kylie in Cammy's skimpy green leotard for the first time. What fewer players may be aware of though, is that separate digitised capture sequences would be produced featuring another woman known as Emma Kearney, who would be Kylie Minogue's stunt double in the movie. Alan Noon, who was the game's designer, comments that he and his team met Emma at a Street Fighter movie after party and she expressed an interest to them that she was happy to help with the production of the game. Noon states that he wasn't sure Emma knew what she was getting into when she agreed to the shoot, but she was a trooper and did a fantastic job, as it couldn't have been nice standing around an old warehouse in a skimpy leotard covered in baby oil under hot lights surrounded by video game nerds. Sadly, Emma did not appear in the game, as the real Kylie managed to free up her schedule for a capture session. But images of Emma dressed as Cammy can still be found online. Noon comments that he wishes retrospectively that they dressed Cammy in a different costume and kept Emma as a separate hidden character, but sadly history shows us that this wasn't to be. Also in 1994, Cammy would appear in the Street Fighter 2 animated movie. That was produced in Japan. While I would say that this version was more accurate to the game's story than the live action film, despite being British, Cammy has an American accent for no reason. But despite this discrepancy, who can forget her running through the streets of London fighting a whole group of men in black suits? In this scene, she is still under the brainwashing of M.Bison and kills the British Minister of Justice. After being captured, she is taken into custody and questioned by Chun-Li at Interpol, but once her brainwashing is worn off, it is revealed she has no memory of what transpired. She would also show up in Street Fighter 2 V, a Japanese animated TV show, and in the American produced Street Fighter 2 cartoon. In this one, Cammy has the stupidest accent you'll ever hear, making her sound like a chimney sweep in Mary Poppins. This is because after doing a little research, I learned that she was voiced by a Canadian woman, which explains why she sounds like someone mocking a British accent rather than speaking with a British accent. Listening to her, I keep expecting her to say things like, "Core governor, can I have some fish and chips?" Listen to this soundbite.
You lie! Bison loves me! You killed my parents! And you drugged me!
The whole show is ridiculous, with her functioning as Guile's love interest and some rather amusing scenes occurring whereby M.Bison brainwashes her and makes her his girl instead, leading to this rather memorable Guile breakdown. Past all this crazy nonsense, Cammy would return to the world of video games, resurfacing twice in 1996. Firstly, as a playable fighter in the crazy crossover fighting game known as XMen vs Street Fighter, with her same sprite also appearing in Street Fighter Alpha 2 Gold, an enhanced version of Alpha 2. Since Alpha 2 is a prequel to the events of Street Fighter 2, the games are set when Cammy is still part of Shadaloo working for M.Bison. In this game, she is depicted wearing a light blue thong leotard that has a small yellow tie attached to the front of her turtleneck. This is paired with a small blue garrison cap, knee-high brown boots, and red gauntlets similar to her classic incarnation. To illustrate the place in the timeline further, her winning pose even sees her salute M.Bison. Due to only being added as a playable fighter in the gold version of the game, sadly nothing more about her past this was outlined until Alpha 3. In this one, she is depicted as a soulless doll sent to assassinate Dalsim. However, her opponent is successful in using his spiritual powers to give her self-awareness. Coming to the realization that Shadaloo were controlling her, Bison sends Vega to observe this female fighter. With events set in motion, Vega eventually confronts Cammy, informing her she is just an experiment that is no longer needed, but ultimately chooses to let her live due to having admiration for her beauty. Later in the Alpha 3 story, she encounters Julie and Junie, two other Shadaloo dolls who are still under the control of M.Bison. Essentially functioning as her sisters, Julie and Junie lack the benefit of self-awareness, so before she can get to M.Bison must deal with them first. Eventually confronting Bison himself, he informs her that she exists solely to become his next body, after his current physical manifestation has been destroyed by his own immense psycho power. During this confrontation with Bison, Cammy manages to break the other dolls free from Shadaloo's mind control. As all of this nonsense is unfolding, Bison reveals she is actually a clone of himself, who even possesses a portion of psycho power he possesses, with the twist being that if he dies, she dies as well. In this epic confrontation, Cammy fights gallantly against Bison's psychic probing and control over her, but while trying to escape, she unfortunately falls unconscious. In this unconscious state, fortunately for Cammy, it is not the end, as Vega manages to rescue her from the base before it is destroyed, opting to leave her on Delta Red's doorstep. If you can recall, Vega is a character who has a warped worldview that sees him wanting to purge all physical ugliness from the world, so allowing someone as beautiful as Cammy to die would go against everything he personally believes in. This ties things up nicely in regards to her appearance in Super Street Fighter 2, bringing good cohesion to the story. In the years that followed, Cammy would continue to make appearances as a playable fighter in non-Street Fighter canon games, such as Marvel vs Capcom 2, Capcom vs SNK, and Capcom vs SNK 2. But aside from this, while she was not a playable character in any of the Street Fighter 3 games, she did make appearances in certain endings. I guess you could call these cameos. While she would miss out on becoming a playable fighter in the Street Fighter 3 games on the Dreamcast, she would get a Dreamcast game where she was not only playable, but with it being named after one of her trademark moves too. Cannon Spike for the Dreamcast is a bizarre multi-directional shooter that plays similarly to the likes of Smash TV, although with a primary focus on boss fights. Even Vega shows up as a boss fight in the game too, carrying his Japanese name Balrog, appearing as Fallen Balrog in this one. A weird gothic version of everyone's favourite narcissist, with him seemingly to have gone even more crazy. While the Street Fighter franchise itself would lay dormant for a number of years, in the late noughties it would finally return to form with Street Fighter 4, a game that story-wise, in ridiculous fashion, is set halfway between Street Fighter 2 and 3. In this one's story, fellow Delta Red member Colonel Wolf informs Cammy that a mysterious group known as Sin has built a dam in India and is cutting off the water supply to her old friend Dalsim's village. Surveillance photos soon revealed that the Sin operatives in the area are shockingly bearing the Shadaloo insignia, so she bursts into action to investigate this further. Building on the story, in Super Street Fighter 4's original video animation, Seth, the leader of Sin, sends Juri to capture Shadaloo dolls Junie and Julie. Juri is a brutal South Korean taekwondo martial artist who derives pleasure from inflicting pain on others. Cammy and Guile arrive on the scene just after Juri has left the dolls unconscious. Despite Cammy's efforts to warn Guile of an incoming attack, he is unable to dodge Juri's fierce moves and is too defeated. Cammy puts up a good fight, but is overwhelmed by Juri, but later enters the Sin tournament to settle the score on the doll's behalf. With all of this going on through the game, this isn't the only doll Cammy chooses to help, also discovering DeCapri in Sin's headquarters, a masked opponent. DeCapri is deeply brainwashed, informing Cammy she hates her, but after an initial flowy, is seen to be weak and collapses. When the mask slips, Cammy notices that the two look almost identical. In the tournament, she successfully defeats Jury, with Junie eventually waking up from her coma, with Cammy promising to help her recover. Moving past this point, Cammy would go on to appear in Street Fighter V, which story-wise occurs after 4, but before 3. The story of the game features Shadaloo initiating Operation Chains, which consists of launching 7 artificial satellites into orbit known as the Black Moons. Planning to spread fear and despair, these can be used to source Bison's psycho power and siphon the energy in order to render him and his forces invincible. During the game, warriors travel the world searching for pieces that control these Black Moons, and during this war for control, Cammy defeats and restrains her sister Decapre, who is still brainwashed by Shadaloo. Speaking of Decapre, she is revealed to be an imperfect product of Shadaloo cloning experiments that would eventually result in Cammy's actual creation. She has a strong resemblance to Cammy, but instead speaks with a strong Russian accent. Knowing of her brainwashing, Cammy refuses to surrender her to the police, even receiving Jury's help along the way. After enough warriors have gathered enough pieces to deactivate the moons, together they storm the Shadaloo base. During this final encounter against Shadaloo, to Cammy's shock, she finds that all of the other dolls have come under the control of Fang, a Shadaloo member introduced in Street Fighter V. She ends up fighting and eventually defeating Julie. Vega ends up taking on Cammy next, defeating her, but she is saved by Decapre, who blocks his claw. Suddenly, Jury arrives, almost crashing her motorbike into the group. Jury challenges Vega with Cammy glancing at Decapre, wondering why she has saved her. Jury is truthful in claiming that Decapre wants to help her, but is also feeling a bit jealous. Vega attacks Jury and the two of them fight, but meanwhile Cammy and Decapre are surrounded by the remaining dolls, which erupts into a big fight. The device that controls the dolls is destroyed during this encounter, and after Cammy and Decapre defeat the other dolls, Cammy notices that the psycho power surrounding them has disappeared. At the end of it all, the sisters are finally reunited. Cammy's story closes with the final scene of Jury and Cammy watching Shadaloo's destruction. Of course, we still have Street Fighter VI to talk about as well. But first, let's talk about what else unfolded with Cammy. Away from the canon, or should I say canon spike, over time Cammy would prove a popular enough Capcom character that she would make countless appearances in many Capcom titles over the years. This would include the terrible Final Fight Streetwise game, where she would appear as a bonus character who appears in the game's tournament section. She would also surface in Street Fighter Cross Tekken, with this game even featuring a story whereby Cammy teams up with Chun-Li, working together to stop Shadaloo and Tekken villains from securing Pandora's box. She would also appear in Namco Cross Capcom, a mobile RPG known as Blood Brothers 2, as a class leader in Shadowverse, and even as a playable character in Power Rangers Legacy Wars. She's bloody everywhere! On top of all of this, due to Cammy's insane level of popularity, she has also appeared in and been the focus of a huge number of comics. So many in fact that if we wanted to break them down in any significant way, it would require a whole nother video to do so. So let me know if you fancy that one down the line. But for now, let's look at what would go down for Cammy in Street Fighter VI. Street Fighter VI occurs at the very latest place in the Street Fighter timeline. Once again, with this one, she appears as a member of British Forces Special Unit Delta Red, distinguishing herself in the operation against Shadaloo, with which she continues to share a fated connection. In Street Fighter VI, Cammy has a brand new fighting attire that lines up closer with the street fighting nature of the game. But for those who prefer her classic look, DLC for it is also available. In Street Fighter VI's arcade mode, she can be seen having a telephone conversation with Junie, with Junie being concerned of her that she focuses too hard on work, forgetting even to eat. The conversation gets more light-hearted, with Cammy mentioning she has changed because people care about her, and they begin discussing the cat charm on Cammy's phone, which Junie apparently got for her as a gift. After getting off the phone, Cammy snaps right back into reality, realising she cannot get over the fact that Shadaloo has been destroyed, and is still paranoid they continue to operate, as she finds it strange that she can't even find their remnants. This sees her fighting around the world, investigating if they still exist. Eventually she ends up in Nashao, a small Asian nation exclusive to the plot of Street Fighter. Here she meets and faces off against the sinister JP, eventually getting the opportunity to interrogate him about what he knows about Shadaloo. JP denies any knowledge whatsoever of the criminal syndicate, but when his body begins to radiate with negative energy, Cammy recognises that there is no question that he possesses the same psycho powers as M.Bison. Cammy asks him about it, but he remains completely silent, even after being threatened by Force. JP escapes and Cammy returns home, with her concluding that from her trip she got more questions than answers, and the fact that JP is around makes her doubt even more that Shadaloo has been put to rest for good. Despite facing this horrifying realisation, she suddenly remembers all the good times she has had recently with Junie, and vows to succeed for her sake and her sisters. For all this, I hope it gives you a clearer idea of how vast and sprawling Cammy's video game legacy is, with this famous fighter continuously showing up across various forms of media, captivating gamers, viewers and readers' imaginations everywhere. Her story is every bit as muddled and disturbing as it is interesting and entertaining, with her crazy life being fraught with triumphs and tragedy. Cammy's memorable look and timeless appeal means there will always be a place in gaming for this blonde bombshell, with her recent impact in Street Fighter 6 further illustrating that we will still have plenty more to see from this character in the future. Cammy has now been with us in our gaming journey for over 30 years, so here's to another 30. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into this iconic character. So if you want more about Street Fighter lore, I strongly recommend you check out my recent upload on the rise and fall of Ken Masters now. Yeah, cheerio.